Welcome back again. For our next curtain raiser conversation in our startup showcase, we're going to hear from Ulrich Scharf, Managing Director and founder of Skillab, on the subject AI to empower job seekers turning skills into careers. Skillab aims to provide equal opportunities for all job seekers by uncovering pathways to social and economic participation through partnership-enabled education and employment. They believe that no person should be deprived of dignity and livelihood simply because their skills are invisible due to status, race, gender, or background. Over to you, Ulrich.
Wonderful. Thank you. And can you hear me? Just to confirm this. Great. So I'm going to quickly share my screen here, hide this, and get started. So I hope you can all see my screen. Please, by audio, tell me if not. So thanks for the introduction, Kate. I'm Ulrich Scharf, Managing Director of Skillab and founder. And I would love to use the next 10 minutes to walk you through the work we do, but also the journey we took in the last 3 years and some of the key lessons we learned along the way. But before I dive into all of this, I would just really love to look deeper at the problem we're solving and addressing. And that is thinking in degrees and job titles marginalizes many job seekers. And I assume that most folks that are today at this conference and are listening right now do have university degrees and some job titles that help to signal to employers what they can do. But the reality is for so many in our society that they simply lack these instruments to show what they can do, but also have a rather clouded or no idea of how they could move forward and build a meaningful career for themselves. And the need and scale around this is quite enormous. So the numbers you see here, the 470 million globally unemployed job seekers that try to find a way into the economy, that is actually a pre-COVID number. So post-COVID, we don't even know how the world is going to look like, but we know it's going to be enormous. And my guess is that all of you had some feeling that this problem is increasing and labor markets are less working for so many of us. And besides just talking about the scale of it, I would love to talk quickly about a couple of groups that are mostly affected and more excluded of labor markets. Think of refugees and migrants. If you move from one country to the next and all of your past degrees and job titles are just pretty meaningless in the new kind of host country, you have to start at zero. And that's for so many people just ridiculous. Or think of displaced workers. If you've spent 30 years in investing into one career and some automation technology, perhaps also an AI-based technology, now makes your profession redundant, what do you do now, right? Like you can't just apply to the next job with the same title. You have to find a new way to utilize your skills and competences. Or think of informal workers. Most likely your mother had to also give up a couple of things in order to raise you and your family. And amazingly, these things are just blank on CVs and so on. So basically any experience that's more from the informal sector is not recognized by employers, and everybody that wants to come back into the labor market just cannot really show what they did in the meantime. And these are just a few examples of where our practices today and how we signal to employers what we can do simply excludes them. And that's where our approach comes in and how we use AI. So we think in skills and not in titles. And what you see here is the TensorFlow model of our AI. And we trained it to think of the labor market and everything people do in jobs in terms of discrete competencies and skills. There's 13,500 little dots here, each of them a discrete task. And we trained this AI to understand how these activities in the job relate to each other. And this is the core technology that allows us to interview folks on how they spend exactly their time between 9 and 5. So to get a concrete understanding of what somebody did with their life instead of just attaching a label to it. And this piece of technology won 2019 the Google AI Impact Award and generally forms the core fundamental technology below our mobile application. So our flagship product and what we roll out to job seekers and unemployed individuals is our personal career assistant that comes in the form of a mobile app or a desktop app. And with this tool, any person in their own time, in their own language, can go through the process to create a skill profile and then explore careers. So the way it works is that you get invited by your career counselor to download the application, start it, and first build a timeline of your life. So what are the jobs, the education, and other experiences you had? And then based on the AI I showed you, this AI is running with you in your own language an interview of what you did exactly in each of these experiences. And that allows us to create a picture of all the small things you did throughout your life. And generally, we can roll that up across all the different experiences. So the result is a very detailed skill profile that captures everything you can do and how much time you spent on it. And we can then take that skill profile and map it into every occupation, career, or job that's in the labor market and in how much demand that is. So in one glance, you get an understanding of how does my skill set fit in and how could I move forward. So that's really that career orientation piece. And on top of that, the tool allows to automatically generate application materials for each job you're interested in. And those application materials are based on your actual skills and competencies. But it also shows to you education that can be online education or from a local community college that allows you to close your skill gap for that specific job. So what are the skills and competencies that would make you more employable for the job you want, and where can you get those? And this tool overall empowers job seekers around the world to really just be more independent from the career counselors and to pursue on the basis of their competencies, jobs and further education. And this piece, as part of our business model, we sell and license to public, private, and nonprofit employment services around the world. So that's our core technology. And I would love to quickly dive, how did we get there and how did we develop this in the last 3 years, as it contains also some lessons. So we started 3 years ago in Europe with an exclusive focus on refugees and migrants. We looked at this use case first because the problem was most extreme when it came to highly qualified refugees moving to Europe and not being able to utilize their skills. And the first version of this was really more a hack together mechanical Turk solution. So we had already our fancy AI and mathematical model, and we just complemented it with ourselves. And we sat next to our computers and just asked the questions the AI wanted to ask for each person, for each job they had. So we sold this to 5 different European cities, traveled around in different languages, mostly then in Arabic, interviewed folks, created skill profiles, and then in InDesign generated job application materials. And then that allowed us to not only validate that there's a market, but you learn an enormous amount of things by just doing this yourself. And then in a beta version, we basically created the app that then had to replace us as a mechanical Turk. And that app we also distributed again with many working partners, which gets us 2.5 years later to the point where we really had a functional production level tool that we could then sell, utilize, and distribute all around the globe. So that, I think, is quite enormous of importance for us because A, it allowed us to have some market validation and learn a couple of things around how this environment works. But most importantly, by going this hard way and manually trying to do this yourself first, we made many lessons. And I would love to kind of share a couple of them. And that is very importantly with your first clients. And if you build with those clients the best possible product you can, only work with mission-oriented clients and partnerships. So if you want to learn from the folks you work with, make sure you learn from people that are actually interested in the outcomes, really want to empower job seekers in our case, and just learn the lessons from them and work in close partnerships. This was key for us to truly understand this problem and build the best possible product. The second core lesson we learned along the way is that it's always nice to build your own custom data model, data frame, or solutions. But quite often, especially when it comes to your frameworks, your interfaces, etc., it is worth a lot to stick to standards, acceptable technology standards that are shared in the industry and that made it much easier for the big players to work with you and integrate with you. And third, as a last point, user-centered design. I completely underestimated that at the beginning. I wanted to build something very, very cool and then share it with the world. But I cannot stress how much we learned. just doing this manually ourselves over and over again, basically trying to be the app we were going to build on a later stage. And we still at this point spend an enormous amount of time of just testing, UX designing, and going through all of the motions of figuring out how a complex piece of technology actually is going to work for a user that might not have the highest digital literacy. So these are just 3 of the core items I wanted to share with also some perhaps of the co-founders in the audience and people that think about building a startup. We're just, by the way, in the process of closing our current fundraising round, and we're generally in a hiring mode. So if you find what we do very interesting, please follow us on LinkedIn or go on our website. We have a couple of positions open, and I'm sure there's a lot more positions opening in 2021. So once the crisis is over with the pandemic, I hope to meet some of you in person. And yeah, if you want to, please also join me in the Q&A session and the backstage room. So thank you very much. I believe my 10 minutes are over, and I'm shuffled now into my backstage Q&A area.
Thanks very much, Ulrich. That was a really good talk. Don't forget to try some one-to-one networking via the networking tab, and be sure to add yourself to our WhatsApp group. Simply head over to the sessions area, scan the QR barcode, or enter the lounge and click on the link to join. We're going to take another short break now, and we'll be back with you in about 10 minutes' time.